The book that we looked into is Becoming Mrs. Rogers, Learning to Live the Fragile X Way. It was written by a woman named Cindy Rogers who discusses her children who were diagnosed with Fragile X syndrome. And in the book, she talks about how she learned about their diagnosis. She talks through how she figured out different interventions and how they planned for future and living in everyday life. Their two boys are named Jake and Joe Rogers. Jake is the older boy who is diagnosed at age 2, and Joe is the younger one who was diagnosed shortly after his birth, at the same time as Jake. And Chris is her husband, and together they all live in Littleton, Colorado.
So the first theme that was really prevalent throughout this novel is uncertainty. So right now I want you guys to just listen to this quote, close your eyes, and imagine hearing this. Your son will likely never live alone, never be a productive member of society, never go to college, and will always need assistance. This is something that Cindy Rogers was told by her doctor after getting the diagnosis for her son, Jake, of Fragile X syndrome. And then after that, she's thinking about how we were handed this diagnosis of an alien condition with no guidebook and told to move forward. How would we do that? So she's wondering about her uncertain future. She's facing an uncertain future, which in the literature is often linked with feelings of depression, thinking about how to adjust to a new and uncertain identity, as these families have to think about the new roles that they're going to have. So Cindy had to leave her job when she got the diagnosis for her kids. And this was definitely a very uncertain time for her because she really valued her career and she didn't know what was going to happen now that she had to step into this new role as a full-time mom and caregiver to children who have disabilities. She says she wasn't able to envision what the future might look like, and she was also really scared and depressed when thinking about the future for her children. So in the book, there's lots of different times where the theme of uncertainty pops up. Definitely when they're thinking about if they should go into a special classroom or an integrated classroom, planning family vacations, Christmas, school behavior plans, employment, transportation, caregivers, and then also all the different terms that go along with disability. Things like SSI, legal guardianship, functional behavior assessments, all of these types of things that they were really afraid of. They didn't know what the future was going to hold, and they also didn't know what it wouldn't hold. So all of these terms that they had to navigate and the different practical aspects of daily life were very uncertain for the Rogers family. On top of that, Jake and Joe had a lot of different uncertainties. Part of Fragile X syndrome is having fear when in new situations really commonly. And Jake and Joe both experienced this. They had anxiety and different uncertainties when it came to making friends and going to play in their new basketball league that they joined. They didn't have a lot of certainty when thinking about the immediate times of how to deal with a new diagnosis, but then also in the future, there were a lot of uncertainties about who would care for Jake and Joe. So that goes into a point in the literature about how uncertainty can be very long-lasting. A lot of studies point out that families have to manage their anxieties, not only from the early years, but also into old age. And one way that caregivers of children with intellectual disabilities reflect this uncertainty is thinking about the continuing challenges of what it takes to raise a child who has an intellectual disability. And this can lead to feelings of being overwhelmed and not knowing what to do.
In addition to uncertainty, we also notice the theme of hope throughout the book. And hope is a very instinctual emotion that anybody experiences when they're faced with adversity, but it's especially true with family raising children with developmental disabilities. So a great quote from the book that I think really sums up how hope is seen in the novel is, "Without any hope at all, we would certainly have given up on any kind of moving forward long ago." So this notion as hope for fuel for progress comes up especially in Cindy's drive to see her kids progress through life. Very on in their diagnosis, Cindy and Chris come up with the joint goal that they want their boys to be as happy and independent as they can possibly be. And when you really think about that goal, it's common throughout whether you're raising a child with significant needs or typical needs. All parents want their children to be happy, they want their children to be independent, and they want their children to be productive members of society. So a lot of the hope or goals that Cindy had, she saw through to the end to see them succeed. A significant one for me was her hope that they could go on a family vacation together. The first iteration of their family vacation, she had thought she had prepared well enough to succeed, but it caused a lot of anxiety for the boys, and they ended up having to leave after only 2 days. But she spent time to learn more about her children, learn more about their diagnosis, and eventually their next family vacation was much more successful, and they went on to have several more successful family vacations. The same use of hope to push for progress was seen again when she wanted her children to go to the store with her, when she wanted them to pack their lunch independently, when she wanted them to get their hair cut from different people at different places, and even managing their video collection independently. And so hope it leads to transformation, and that shows itself a lot in the literature. Coster, Jevin, and Sabzi really looked at hope and how it transacts with different aspects of family life when they're raising their children with developmental disabilities. And they found that it transacts with the caregivers, transacts with the family values, it transacts with their faith, and just their realistic understandings of what they can expect of their children. And unsurprisingly, hope has a negative effect on depression. So the more hope you have in the now signifies less depression and less anxiety later in life. And this research was applied to families raising children with disabilities. And they found that not only was this prevalent in their lives as well, that they had less depression and anxiety the more hope they had, but it also just told of a greater feeling of resilience, which Abby is going to discuss more in depth.
Yeah, so this brings us to the theme of perseverance. So in the pages of Becoming Mrs. Rogers, they're filled with stories of overcoming obstacles and rising to the occasion. So even on days where it felt like the weight of the world was really on this family's shoulders, they were able to keep moving forward because they had the support of others around them to help lighten that load. So this is really seen in this quote here from Cindy saying, "We have been given sound professional advice, resources, and knowledge by some of the finest minds in the Fragile X community. All of these tools would play a huge part in allowing us to move forward. We just needed to take the next step." All right. And here you can see a picture of Cindy. She's here with Tracy, their OT, and Mouse, their SLP, and another colleague that worked very closely with her family and her boys. And these people were very key figures in this family's story and their ability to persevere on a day-to-day basis. This quote here from Cindy, "We had to figure this out. We needed help. We could not know everything. It was beyond our ability to help on our own." And these feelings are also echoed in literature on families with children with disabilities. In Santoso et al. 2015, they discuss resilience and disability. They look at the experiences of Indonesian mothers with children diagnosed with ASD, and in their study they found that sources of resilience were found to reside both within the mothers themselves but also in their outside social supports. And then further in Bavely and Skinner and Sparkman, they've looked at the experiences and perspective of families newly diagnosed with Fragile X syndrome, and they found that seeking out a professional support to help understand their child, learn what they could do to help, what not to do, and also just kind of getting an idea of what to expect in the future were big proponents to help support their resilience and perseverance. And then this quote right above this picture, "Many of our successes over the years wouldn't have been possible without the people in our lives." And beneath that quote, there's a picture of the oldest son, Jake, with one of those influential people in their lives. This is Daniel, who is one of Jake's partners in the Unified Basketball League and actually worked with him and helped him make his first basket, which was a really big, monumental event for the family. In the book, we see that the Rogers' ability to persevere is directly related to the support they gained from their friends and their community and how they helped them to keep moving forward and to get where they are today. So this theme is also present in literature for individuals with intellectual disabilities. In DeWalt et al., it talks about how friendship and social participation are key domains for improving the quality of life for individuals with intellectual disabilities. And then further, when planning for transitions into adulthood, these two studies looked at the perspectives of parents and determined what strategies were most effective to help in that transition planning stage. And both of those studies included a component of building informal community-based supports. And also further back to the resilience study, these mothers of children with autism spectrum disorder were able to increase their ability to persevere through participating in spiritual activities, using external resources, and also just sharing problem-solving techniques with other mothers.
So what we learned from the themes of uncertainty, hope, and perseverance through this novel have a lot of implications for OT. So one of the first and most prominent things that we should know is that OTs should really be understanding that when people are responding to a disability, this is an altered life cycle pattern that they're now having to address. And so with that, we need to be really understanding and empathic listeners. We also have to be mindful that these families might be grieving as entire units. It's not just one person in the family who might be experiencing grief or transition in response to a disability. So when we're thinking about uncertainty that families might be facing, we have a really key role in taking on a family-centered approach. This is a part of evidence-based practice that's gotten a lot of attention both in our own learning in classes and in research literature. Being family-centered means that we should really focus on encouraging parents to seek the input of their children who have disabilities when they're thinking about the uncertain future. Because when parents are able to recruit the voices of the children that they have who have disabilities, it can lead to a lot of better feelings of hope and willingness to persevere once those feelings and perceptions of the kids who have disabilities are valued. And this shows up in research literature in a study done by Price and their colleagues. Another thing that OTs working with families of kids with disabilities should do is to recognize the very, very big support that different communities and OTs themselves play in a family's ability to be resilient and to persevere, to have hope, and to face their uncertain future. So what we can do as OTs is not only just be supportive ourselves, but also to collaborate interdisciplinarily with different team members, to be able to have kind of this support network that's a toolbox that families can use and turn to, like Cindy did when she was trying to help navigate how she would live out her life and help her sons live out hopeful and enriching lives.
And lastly, we're just going to finish up with some questions that we have for future study on this topic. We have seen in the research over and over again that there is this sort of transformative power of hope for these families, but how can we, I'm going to redo that. So we have seen in the research this sort of transformative power of hope and what it can do for these families. But some questions we have are how can we, as healthcare providers and social supports, help to inspire this hope when it may be lacking for certain families? And then also just addressing the variety of social and professional supports. The research has shown that these are very key factors in helping families persevere through difficult times. But how can we increase access to these supports for families of children with Fragile X syndrome specifically?
Any questions?
None? Okay.
Yeah.